What is it that you're looking for in enlightenment? Well, I don't know really. It's very individual to everybody, isn't it? My assumption that I know. Yeah. Well, I think ultimately what people are looking for is the end of suffering, even though that might not be what they initially think of. Roger Castillo and Ramesh Balsekar used to say, you're looking for happiness, but it depends what you mean by happiness. That could mean so many different things to people. The Buddha used to say it's the end of suffering, and I like that idea. And to me, suffering is the attachment to pleasure and the belief that pleasure will set you free, and the avoidance of pain and the belief that pain will cage you. And I think that's roughly the same as what Roger and Ramesh would say. They would say, actually, it would be different. They would say it's the end of doership, which is the belief that you are the doer of your actions. Yeah, so actually they would say it different. That's, I think, what they would say. So that is also true as well. Like, that is part of the end of suffering to me. Like, really seeing that you aren't the doer of your deeds, that there isn't a doer in here. There isn't somebody that does. When I got into this subject, I thought that freedom was becoming something better than what I was. So adding things to myself. I thought enlightenment was like this superpower, and I just wanted to stop suffering as well, but I wanted to have this superpower of enlightenment. It was like nothing in life can hurt me. Like, I am this ultimate strength and this ultimate force that cannot be disturbed. And I think there was lots of unconscious things as well going on. So this body-mind also saw it as an add-on, like this ultimate character, like a superhero from a comic book. Yeah. But it's not like that. It's so vastly different from expectation. It's the end of conceptual thinking. Or it's not the end of conceptual thinking, it's the end of the attachment to that conceptual thinking. So this world is seen through dualism. So this world is seen through wholeness. Right now, wholeness is looking, and wholeness is free. So wholeness is not looking at itself through concepts. It's not, there is a subject here that's in relationship to an object. There is a room, there is somebody in a room, there's somebody in a country, on a planet, in the middle of space. It's totally beyond all of that. It's free of that. It's watching without and experiencing without any concepts. Concepts come from the brain and they come in time. So it's after, that concepts are after. The initial experiencer is without concepts. So it's totally free and still. So it doesn't have the idea that it's looking at a wall or looking at the floor, or it's contained, or it belongs inside the body. it's beyond all of that, absolutely unconceptual. It's total freefall. It's very scary for the person in a way, because it has no judgment on anything. It doesn't want anything, doesn't have belief, doesn't care about anything, not in an uncaring way. It just that caring believes to the conceptual world, belongs to the conceptual world. It's just watching innocently. It's so pure, and it's so immersed in itself. You could call it love. It's like radically free and alive. It's so different from the way that humans normally experience. Humans experience it's almost simultaneously. So the consciousness becomes contained in the person. So the experiencer comes contained in the person, and then the person is always looking at the world conceptually. It doesn't realize it, but the mind is subject, object, good, bad, right, wrong, wall, me, floor, sofa. It's always looking in separation, and it's an energetic thing. And this is looking but without any containers, experiencing but without any containers. And this experiencing is happening and not happening. It's really something quite special. It's beautiful. It's so free. It's so intimate. It wants nothing, it's after nothing, contains nothing. It's got no limits on it. It's so limitless, it's not even limitless, because that's a concept. It's just radically here, now, present. And everything's coming from that. So this speaking comes from that emptiness, from that vastness. The looking comes from that vastness. The same there. The feeling is in a lot of people is that they are looking at me, but there isn't somebody looking at me. That's like the identification with the person. There is nothing looking at me. There is simply looking and experiencing happening. And that's all there is. It's so silent and still and free and alive. And it's not asking for anything. It's not like, okay, this body mind has to have a particular life. It has to earn a certain amount of money, have a certain house, look a certain way, be a certain way, want certain things. It's just experiencing absolutely unconditioned love. The person runs in time, and there's nothing wrong with the person running in time. That's how it is. Like this morning I went for a walk, but that's not who you are. That's an image of somebody that went for a walk that we could label as this body, but that's not you. That's an image of a past event. What you are is the experiencing now. That's what you always are. There's only ever experiencing. It's right here, right now. Just this experiencing. And then you could say, okay, so tonight I'm going out to a dance, but that's an image of a you going out to a dance. And you have this image and it contains thoughts, it contains feelings, it contains a picture. And it's like maybe you picture yourself as fat, or maybe you picture yourself as skinny or good looking or ugly. And none of that's true because it's all relative. Compared to who? Compared to someone obese, maybe you're very skinny. Compared to somebody that's anorexic, maybe you aren't skinny. So it's all in comparison. So you have a self-image that isn't the truth, an image, and then you believe that's who you are, and it's always in time. You is always in time. Tony Parsons used to say, me is in time. T-I-M-E, me is in time. So you always have an image of yourself going to the toilet earlier, image of yourself tripping over. All these images, and some of these images, a lot of the time people have a negative self-view because of the way we're brought up in our society and attachment issues and the nature of the thinking of the mind and the education system. So a lot of people have a low self-esteem, and then they go through therapy and reconditioning and create a better, more healthy ego, and that's great. I am not against that, because to me, you could say in a way the ego or the character is something that happens in the body. It's like habits and ways of behaving. So if you went to school for 10, 15 years and you're told you're stupid, which most people would have been told, because there's only a few people that will be the intelligent one, and then everyone else is like, you're stupid. But they won't say that overtly, but they'll unconsciously say that by the fact that they get lower grades and all this comparison stuff that we do in the education system and we believe is okay for our children to go through. So you have a low self-esteem that has like, oh, I'm not very clever, or I can't do this, or I won't be able to do this. And that's something that is conditioned in the body. That isn't necessarily suffering. That's not necessarily attachment. It can be attachment and it can be seeking, but it's a condition. Like if I kept telling Khaleesi, my dog, like a bad girl every time she does something, then when she goes to do that, then there will be fear arising, there'll be insecurity arising, not because she's identified with that, but because the body's adopted to that. I remember reading in Maya Anguilerius, I know why the cage bird sings, I forget how to pronounce her name. I think it was in that where she described how this farmer used to put the dogs in a bag. It might be a different book or one of the other ones after. I know why the cage bird sings. So they would put the dog in the bag, and then they would make one of the black slaves or people that work from them come and kick the dog in the bag, and then they would open the bag and the dog would see the black person having kicked it. And the reason they did this was to form aggression for black people. So it was a way to train the dog to be afraid and nervous and aggressive towards black people and not white people. It might not work, but there's a good chance that would condition the dog in that way. That doesn't mean the dog is identified, because how could a dog ever identify? It doesn't know that it's a body. It's just that the body has responds to do that. So if you're in the education system where you're being told you're not smart, or you're not being interacted with as much as the really intelligent kids, then, or the kids that have good memory and it can do the tests well in school, then you adopt I can't really do this, or I'm not very good, or maybe your parents weren't very supportive. So the body learns these conditions, but that isn't necessarily identification. The identification is belief. It's the energetic belief that that is who you are, and as soon as that happens, there is this contraction into being something small, a subject in relationship with objects. And when that happens, a seeking arises, because there's always discomfort. So you begin to seek for this home that you kind of know. So there's a kind of knowing that you've lost something. So you seek for freedom in the person, in the habits and conditions. And then the belief becomes very quickly that getting pleasure is freedom. So getting what I want, food, sex, drugs, rock and roll, being better, education, all of these things will lead me to freedom. And that is the suffering to me, the attachment to the person, and then the seeking for freedom in the person, which will never work in the personal world. And the person, when I say seeking freedom in the person, I mean like it can be in like getting a new car, because the person believes that getting the new car will be it. Having the new drugs will be it. Whatever it is the person believes. So that's the suffering element. So it's not necessarily conditioning. A lot in spirituality that I really understand that why this happens is there is a working on the conditioning. And I feel like why that evolved in Indian spirituality, working on the person, and even in Western teachers, is because often the ego needs a certain amount of balancing prior to waking up. If the ego is just in pure suffering, it can have one of these magical snaps where it just breaks, and there's loads of stories where people just break and then there's this opening. But often it requires a more stable ego, because when you're really suffering, how can you really hear non-duality? You're just so desperate not to have pain. So immense depression, like not doing things, inaction, excessive seeking. It's like if you go and you watch people that have no interaction with non-duality and they're just like really invested in this world, it's like they're so invested in their ego, in their delusion, that you can't really speak to them about non-duality. It'd be like a craziness. It'd be like, pooh, and it just wouldn't make sense to them, because there is such a strong momentum towards getting that pleasure. So in Indian spirituality and in a lot of like Western teachers now, they mix it with psychology, because it does seem that there needs to be a settling down of the person, and then when the person becomes more settled, then there can be a waking up that happens. Because what happens to me in these talks, even though I say to me it's really illusory, I just say that because it's like not wanting to be too prescriptive, like this way is the right way, like trying to give you your own, that body mind, its own way of working these things out, not me just being like the right teacher. So to say to me, it's a way, there isn't a me here, it's just a way of speaking to make me sound less like the authority figure, and to encourage you to work it out for yourself, rather than this is the truth, this is the right way, everyone listen to me. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. Anyone want to remind me on Skype or YouTube chat what I was just saying? Sorry, I was just getting there. Something about waking up, yeah, danke. That was helpful. Oh yeah, thank you, no, that was helpful, it reminded me. Thank you, Kwak. So to me, when I speak, what's happening is it's like a resonance, a calling, like it's like this energy, these words are calling something forward. So even though there's an intellectual part to it, and that's beautiful, the true teaching is this calling part, that there is a speaking, and in that speaking there is a resonance with something that's much deeper. And it's not of the mind, it's not of the ego, it's not of the personality structure, but as this begins to happen, it creates things in the personality structure like bliss or expansion or all these different things, but it's calling to that which is actually listening. It's not quite the right language, because that which is listening is always free, but it's seemingly caged. So it's like almost like pulling that forward out of itself. It's like it's all caged inside the body, and it's like pulling it back into itself, but it is in a way already in itself. It's just seemingly locked in a cage. And that to me is the real teaching of non-duality, and it's instantaneous. It happens right here in this moment. It's not a time-bound thing that's happening to the personality. And when the personality is unbalanced and unconscious of itself, it's like dragging, it's like going into lots of seeking and going into lots of illusions. And it's kind of like distracting from what actually is happening. So say if it's in lots of depression, then it's so much trying to avoid pain that it's like blocking this listening, that it's beyond itself. It's the best way to describe it is like really thick clouds on a sunny day. Like when there's like a really dense person, it's like really thick clouds. And if that's all you've ever experienced your whole life, the light, the sunshine isn't known. And it's like as they become more dense, then the sun leaks through. And then it's like, oh yeah, remembering I am the light. The light is everywhere. Yeah, I mean, that's not a great analogy, but yeah, so this is why a lot of the time, but it doesn't mean, and this is the problem with talking about, and I understand why some people completely ignore the human part, because the problem with the human part is the person is obsessed with itself. So it also loves the idea and hates the idea that it can work on itself, dependent on the way you're conditioned. So it loves the idea that I can do things to wake up because it gives the person hope, but it's all in the personal world. And that's okay, giving yourself hope about waking up, but it's in feelings, it's in the emotions, it's in stories, it's in you, the illusory you. And so this is what I really like about Neo-Advaita, is it radical non-duality, is that it points so much to that which is beyond, it just doesn't deal with the person at all. It just keeps pointing back to what's beyond. But what the other shortcoming I see of Neo-Advaita, the difficulty with Neo-Advaita, is that when the personality structure is really unbalanced, it's not really hearing non-duality. When it's really unbalanced, it's taking on non-duality as a new identity. And, taking on the identity of non-doership, of no self, I mean, it kind of like fits into a lot of personality disorders and a lot of mental illnesses in a way. It's not healthy for the person. In some way, the teaching can be relaxing and the teaching can be good for the personal self. But in other ways, it's not. Like part of having a good, strong, healthy ego is knowing what you want and asserting what you want. That's not saying there is someone there that wants things and doesn't want things. It's the body. Like imagine if Khaleesi, my dog, didn't know what she wanted in every moment. She would kind of be insane. Should I go for a walk with Lisa or shouldn't I? Should I? A bad dog for going for a walk with Lisa? I should. No, she'll feel guilty. She'll feel bad. No, I'll feel guilty. They'll feel bad. I'll let her down if I go for a walk. No, I won't let her down if I go for a walk. What will she think of me? What will the other dogs think of me? It's kind of like an insanity. Like to not have strong wants. Like strong wants are, like I say to Khaleesi, walkies, and a lot of the time she's like, yes. I say to Khaleesi, time for a bath, and she's like, no, F off Lisa, you come near me and I'm going to get cross. So we have to get the chicken out. Actually, she's quite sweet now because she knows often when I come back from a walk, she has to get into the shower. So I'll say to her, like we come back from a walk, and somehow I shouldn't say on your bed because she'll associate it as a bad thing. I go, on your beddy. She actually likes going on her beddy generally. But this, when we get back from a walk, I go, on your beddy, she knows it. She'll look at me and then she just kind of walks to the shower room, like very upset, but she knows that it has to be done, and she knows afterwards she gets her bicky. It's quite amusing, actually. I've managed to condition her to do that. She makes me laugh so many times a day. If you've got an animal, you'll understand this. So the other one is that when I go for a walk, I often have to go for a pee in the walk because I go for a very long walk and I don't have a very big bladder. And she kind of knows when I'm going to go for a pee, and she's just like, I do not want to come for this. And because I have to have her on the lead, she has to come, and she's really like, it's quite amusing. And I'm like, come on, please, Easy. And that, like, can you see, like, she's very clear what she wants and what she doesn't want. And your dog would be a bit insane if it would have a lot of problems if it didn't know. And a lot of, like, compulsive thinking. So one part of having a healthy ego is the body being very clear with what it wants and what it doesn't want. It doesn't mean always getting what you want. It means a clarity. But when you get into non-duality, if there's already a disbalance in that, then it can add to that, and the person can think, oh, well, yes, I'm close to enlightenment because I really don't know what the F I want. And it's not having wants. It's not about the wants disappearing and being empty of all wants. It's finding the empty beyond that. The functioning of the human is to have wants, but they are not yours and they're not personal. And to me, this is really important. Then you've got the opposite one, like the really extreme one of like maybe a more narcissistic character that is like, that has wants without any empathy. And that's also like the opposite end of it. That's not a healthy ego either. It's like knowing what it wants, but it's like what it wants is more important than anything else. And that's not true of Khaleesi either. She's not like that. I mean, like it's in the shower and she's like, you fucking, and she's not happy about it, but she complies because she understands in some way that has to happen because Lisa's telling her. But we're also community animals like dogs. This is why we get on so well with dogs. So this is where it's a personality disorder, when it's like having your wants met without any empathy, without any consideration of the social implications, like lying, cheating to get what you want, deceiving, risking other people's lives or livelihoods, or all types of things. That is not a healthy ego. But often that gets muddled up in non-duality. And sometimes there can be awakening without a healthy ego, or without things that aren't very healthy, and then there needs to be a stabilizing of that. Like a more integration. Yeah. Well, I certainly went off on one, didn't I? So the waking up isn't personal. It's not about the person becoming empty. That's the character. It's that the character isn't who you are. And freedom isn't found in the character. You are not this person that went for a walk this morning. That is an image that's appearing now. You're not the person that's going to work tomorrow. That is an image. That is the story of this body. And there has been an immersion with that, and then a feeling like that is who you are, and that's who's conscious, and that's who's listening to Lisa now. That is not who's listening. It's a filter in which life is being experienced through. But it's not who you are. Who you are is this immense, non-dual space that's intimate with everything, that knows everything because it is everything. And it's free. And it's here and accessible right now in this. Right now. Yeah. Okay, we go to questions. Oh no, hang on, just let me hang on, my love. Let me just take it back to the title, because I have a feeling that I haven't rounded up the title. What are you looking for, enlightenment? So to me, although we've already defined that there is no me, I'm just saying that to be humble, so you don't get into this dogmatic idea that I know all the answers, but it's just that the words are coming out here. To me, to you, to me, to you, to me, to you. To me, freedom is the end of suffering, which is the end of the attachment and the belief that the person is who you are, and that seeking pleasure and avoiding pain will free you. I think what a lot of people are looking for is a story. But really, deeply, what every person truly wants is this, is remembering who they are.